The 1860s had been a tumultuous time for the states that would soon become Germany. The Second Schleswig War had pitted Denmark against Prussia and Austria, and although Prussia had generally come out ahead on land, most of the naval side of the war had been in Denmark's favour. Only the arrival of a significant number of Austrian warships during the latter stages of the conflict had seen the naval situation become a bit more of a stalemate. Shortly thereafter, the short-lived North German Confederation had been formed, and one of the first things they'd done was approve the expansion of the fleet to a corps of 16 ironclads to try and prevent another conflict resulting in a blockade of the German coastline. A number of vessels were ordered, and although efforts had been made over the late 1860s to move production over to German yards, and several vessels had been laid down there, larger ships were still somewhat beyond the local yards' capabilities, and so two of the largest were instead ordered from the UK. The designs were ready by the end of the 1860s, but a small thing known as the Franco-Prussian War got in the way. Although this conflict did actually further emphasise the need for a fleet, and by the time the ships were actually laid down in 1871, the North German Confederation was no more, and the German Empire stood in its place. As it turned out, the last German capital ships ordered from foreign yards, the Kaiser class, consisted of two vessels, Kaiser and Deutschland, with both ships laid down on the River Thames in London in 1871 and 1872 respectively, with both being launched in 1874 and commissioned in 1875. As mid to large-ish sized central battery ships, displacing just over 7,600 tons in normal condition and almost 9,000 tons when fully loaded, they were just about big enough to be considered full capital ships in their own right instead of armoured frigates. Armed with 8 single 26cm or 10.2-inch Krupp breech-loading rifled guns, 4 per side, with each broadside firing 2 guns in the traditional manner, with one having a roughly 90-degree fire arc going from dead ahead to just past perpendicular, and one with a limited arc of about 45 degrees running from perpendicular to somewhat aft, giving the central battery a 2-gun salvo ahead, with 4 guns if you happen to be directly abreast, and 3 guns on most angles, with an aft blind spot covering about the rear 90-degree arc. To address this problem, a single 21cm or 8.3-inch gun was mounted right aft. Armour consisted of a 10-inch thick belt, thinning down to 5 inches at the ends, with 8 inches of armour on the central battery, with 7-inch bulkheads fore and aft. A small shield of armour was also raised up from the belt aft to cover the rear-firing gun. Propulsion came courtesy of 5,500 indicated horsepower via a single screw with a top speed of 14 knots, along with a full ship rig, with the 2 funnels being able to be retracted when under sail power alone. The 2 ships did differ in some minor details. For example, Deutschland had larger coal bunkers and a slightly better protected conning tower than her sister. Once in service, they actually had relatively short active service lives. Being some of the larger modern ships in Imperial German Navy service, they were sent to the Mediterranean in 1877 to safeguard German interests during the latest round of Russo-Turkish conflict, but in 1878 they were placed in reserve, only emerging occasionally for exercises until the end of the 1880s, where they saw a couple of years of long-distance cruising before being taken in hand for modernisation. This lasted 6 years overall, and saw the masts cut down with a pair of military masts with fighting tops installed instead. The central battery remained, but the aft gun was replaced with a 150mm or 5.9-inch weapon, and the upper deck was given a liberal scattering of modern guns as well. On Kaiser, at first, this was 6 150mm guns, which were then replaced with 6 105mm or 4.1-inch guns, and 9 88mm or just under 3.5-inch guns, whilst Deutschland, taken in hand a few years into the process, went straight to 8 150mm and 8 88mm guns. Around a dozen or just over that many 37mm cannon were then scattered through the fighting tops on each ship, and 5 torpedo tubes were also installed. 1 underwater tube aft, 1 on either side, these were above water on Kaiser and underwater on Deutschland, with 2 above water tubes mounted forward. Both ships then spent some time in the Western Pacific, Kaiser from 1895 and Deutschland from 1897, but both were recalled at the turn of the century and then turned into harbour ships in 1904, and then renamed to Uranus and Jupiter, respectively, which freed up their original names for use in newer ships. Deutschland-Jupiter was decommissioned fully in 1906, used as a target ship the following year, and then was sold for scrap in 1908, whilst Kaiser-Uranus was decommissioned at the same time, but became a barrack ship lasting through the First World War until 1920, when she too was sold for scrap.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.